So, can you tell me, Paul, what is, like, how would you describe your childhood?
I'm relatively happy. I had very supportive parents that encouraged my artistic side very early in life.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, did you?
Oh, no, you're good. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah, they were. I had an older brother who was 4.5 years older than me, and we had a good relationship. My parents liked to drink, as a lot of parents did in that era. But I feel like in relationship to a lot of people that I know, including my wife, I had a relatively easy upbringing, I feel.
Were your parents artists as well, or?
I think my dad was an aspiring artist. He was a neon sign salesman. He
Okay.
loved what he did. He really enjoyed his job. But later in life, he sort of showed me some writing that he had done when he was younger. And it's also interesting that my dad was a big music lover. And of course, growing up, I didn't like the music, most of the music that he listened to, other than musicals, West Side Story and My Fair Lady in South Pacific, which I learned through my parents growing up. But my dad was also really into Louis Armstrong and big band and a certain kind of jazz. And what's interesting now is I find a lot of the music I listen to for pleasure is music that my dad listened to when I was growing up that I resisted.
Oh, wow. Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, I think my dad was musical on some level and maybe never pursued it. And he had good taste in music that I later appreciated. I still love the music that I grew up to, but I've also been able to incorporate the music that my dad loved, and I have a real appreciation for it now.
Is there a memory you have, a childhood memory that's very fond?
It just in general or specifically around that?
Just in general. It doesn't have to be music. It could maybe be like an outing or an event your family had, or a conversation that just really stood out to you.
I think a childhood memory that really stands out is when I was first learning to play guitar, and I was desperate to play electric guitar and be in a band. And I was, whatever I was, 11. And, my dad and my mom always supported my musical side. And there was a music store near where we lived where I would take guitar lessons. It was called Krell Music. And there was a group of teenagers that had a band there, and they had all their equipment set up. And I was told on this one day that I would get to go there and get to use all of their equipment. And I remember thinking when my parents were driving me to Krell Music that I was the happiest kid on earth. I couldn't imagine that anybody else could be happier than me for what I was about to do, is to play electric guitar with amplifiers for the first time.
Did it work out pretty well?
Oddly, I don't remember ever playing. I just remember going to the store and being so excited.
Is there a conversation you had with your mom or dad that has impacted you today?
Yeah, there was a moment with my dad, at a point in my life where I was slightly older, maybe 13 or 14, and I was in a band. We had electric guitars. I was very happy. But I was asked to join another band with a friend of mine that I'm still very close with. And I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't know how to tell the band I didn't want to be in anymore. And my dad just said, do what's in your heart. What choice do you really want? What do you want to do? And in some way, that little instruction of just follow what you want and be kind about it. And I was able to let go of the old band and be in the new band. And I
Mm.
think that just taught me something about ego and about knowing when the right time to act on what you perceive as the right thing to do for you in that moment as a very young age. Just what band do I want to be in? Pretty innocent. but later that can transform and be something more about life and something more key in terms of how we live.
What's specifically ego related? How does that compute for ego?
I guess for me, it computes in a way that am I doing this because I'm an ego-driven person,
Oh,
because I'm selfish in some way. And yeah, maybe ego isn't really the right term. It was maybe more that I'm being selfish and that I'm doing this only for me. And my dad sort of let me know that's okay.
mm,
Sometimes you do things just for you. You're not hurting anyone else. You're being honest. You're being authentic. And when you're in your truth, sometimes being in your truth can hurt somebody else, but ultimately it's healing. Because if you're in your truth and somebody is getting hurt, well, then that's just their path. And naturally they will get over it. And as a young kid, I didn't really understand that. I just didn't want to hurt people. I
okay.
had that sensitivity where I'm going to disappoint friends of mine because selfishly, I'd rather be in this band. And I think my dad showed me that that actually wasn't being selfish. That was just being authentic.
So how have you, as you've grown and experienced so many more things, how have you kind of seen, how do you balance the difference between being authentic and then something that you think might be selfish?
Well, I think it's always a struggle, but I think that as one gets older, hopefully you become more self-aware and you can delineate between I'm doing this ego, selfish, I'm being insensitive to someone else, as opposed to this is my path and this is their path, and our paths are no longer the same, and that's okay.
Mm.
And it might be uncomfortable, and that's okay.
What's something that you find really hard about life now? Like, what's a struggle that you're facing, whether in the season you're in or just in your work? What's something that you find particularly difficult that you see yourself either growing in or trying to grow in?
I think the obvious thing for me right now is the arts in the industry, whether it's film and TV or theater. I think the arts are really in trouble. I think they have been for a while, and I think we're just very late in the game. And I think my industry in particular, that I am a part of, that I depend on for, survival. I feel that I have a frustration that I can do very little about what is happening in our industry, maybe the Cassandra effect. It's like I'm trying to scream from the rooftops that we're in trouble, but nobody's listening. And
Mm,
by the time they do listen, it will be too late. And I think that being an artist my whole life and experiencing the music business as I did for a long time and how that worked, and then transitioning into theater and seeing how that worked for my career, and that felt really good for a long time. And now I feel like we're at a very perilous place in the arts with AI, with how I feel the income equality that has been prevalent in our country for a long time is becoming more obvious to people in the arts, and how that is working. So that's a general life frustration I have, is how do I work? How do I continue to make a living
mm,
doing what I do? My friends that I worry about, that maybe haven't done as much as I have, but are super talented, and that are now finding, like, how do I make a living doing this? Where
mm.
maybe a few years ago there was a path, and now I think there's less of a path. And I worry about the next generation coming up, and how will they be able to create in a way that will sustain them in their lifestyle, and yet, in this sort of craziness that's happening, I feel a deep frustration because I'm not really sure what to do about it.
Mm. And when you're talking about AI, how does that relate to the music writing industry in general? And then also, when you're talking about payment inequality, do you mean the fact that if you're an artist, that's kind of automatically like, you won't make a lot of money unless you can become a really big name, which doesn't happen to a lot of people?
Yeah, I mean, I think that here's what I would say. I think subscription streaming has
Mm,
been the main factor in changing the payment structure for artists. As an example, I've been, a songwriter, a pop songwriter for many years, and I was lucky enough to have a couple of #1 songs that really helped me survive. And I was able to do things. I was able to build a recording studio where I wrote Jane Eyre, and I was able to create that show. That is less possible now
mm,
to have that happen. I feel like we are at a point where it's been shifted so much that it's going to be a while till we catch up to actually even know what the solutions are. But we know as consumers, as an example, and not to get too into the weeds about this, but as a consumer, I love Apple Music. I love Netflix and Amazon and all the movies and shows that I can watch for free. Even though I'm paying a monthly fee for them, it all feels free because we're not downloading something and paying for it generally, unless we're buying a movie from Amazon. So that really changes the dynamic of how people think about paying for music and paying for film and TV.
mm,
And what it's done is it's made it much more difficult for the independent minded artists like myself to find how we can even earn money in that arena. As an example, my show Pride and Prejudice has been on Amazon Prime for a couple of years and doing extremely well. And I'm not even going to tell you how little money I've received from that.
mm,
In the past, you have a hit like that's a nice financial windfall for an artist. That's how we survive. So I think there's a real challenge there for all of us. And the way that AI fits into that is that AI, like for instance, the scripts that I'm writing right now, I want to write this musical by Paul Gordon pre-AI, because I didn't use AI to write these scripts. Now, AI can be used as a tool. As an example, we can AI is sort of super Google, and I use Google for research all the time, and I research when I'm writing my shows. That's just part of what I do. And AI is actually really helpful in that aspect. But when it starts to write scripts, and when it starts to write songs, and when it starts to replace people in a way where instead of needing 20 people to work on this film, I just need one person to tweak it. And I think a lot of people are going to be forced out of work. There's going to be less work. And I think it's going to be challenging. I mean, how it will all work out, none of us know. But I feel like, I'm sorry, that was a very long answer to what am I
no.
struggling with right now? That's the arena I'm struggling with, is art. And how do we continue to make art? How do we get paid? And how do we make a living doing what we love?
Mm. What do you find something, and to counteract that, something about life right now, personally, that you find beautiful or encouraging to you, that you really value?
My friends in my community, the friends that I've stayed in touch with over the years, the people that I love, my wife, the joy of my relationship with my wife. And we have some very dear friends that are in the industry that live really close to us, that we love to spend time with. And so that's really the beauty. I love where I live. I'm looking at the Hudson River right now and the New York skyline. I feel so blessed that I get to live on the water and wake up and be able to record music and write music. And I think probably my greatest joy is writing a song. Writing a song, and at the end of the day, like listening to it and feel and enjoying it and feeling like, man, I just created something. And I think probably that is one of my highest joys, is
Mm.
creating something that I feel good about, and just living a life where I'm allowed to do that, at least for right now, and be able to sustain myself and my family. So that's really the most beautiful aspect of my life.
And then would you say, is that the reason why? Because I know speaking with individuals, like life is so hard. There's so many things about life now that are difficult, maybe even more so than they used to be.
Yes.
And um, I mean, especially for young people in general, there's kind of a despair of like, what's the point of living?
Yes.
Um, why do you live? Like, what is for you the meaning of life to you that makes you keep going when there's so many things, like even what you mentioned with your own industry being in upheaval, not quite sure what you're going to do. There's a lot of unknowns. Why do you continue living?
It's really the same answer, creating. I love to
Mm,
create. I feel that what I'm creating feels important to me. I can't speak for anybody else.
right.
Um, I've written a few shows that I feel is that I feel are saying the things that I want to say, that is true to my voice. And I feel like I have something to say. I feel like I have something to contribute. Whether anybody listens to me, I have no control over. So every day I wake up and go, what can I create today? How can I get what I've created out into the world? And I feel encouraged by the art that I'm creating and those around me, my collaborators, the people that I'm working with, that I get inspired by. Um, and I feel that this is our way out, is through. I feel art is incredibly healing, and that's what's really necessary for right now. So I feel like the reason that we all need to be here is to keep trying to make the world better. And I think, not to get political, but I'm very political. And I feel being active politically is absolutely mandatory and necessary for all of us right now to create a better world. Because as we know, the world is in big trouble. We've learned a lot of things about ourselves over the last 6 to 8 years, some things that even I didn't see coming as somebody who has followed politics very closely for a long time. And I feel like I feel like the youth of our country will save us, has to save us. We have to become more enlightened as we continue, because I feel like the unenlightenment that we are witnessing, that maybe is more prevalent in terms of our perception of it than we've been able to see in the past, maybe is a great wake-up call for us. And maybe we all have to think about it and get to work and do the work necessary to make life worth living and make this world livable in
Mm,
such a way that it feels so negative to young people right now,
mm.
how we've done everything, and how particularly my generation, to my embarrassment and shame, has done so much damage to our country and the world.
What do you think what is something, if you could, because I know, as you said, you can't change things per se yourself. Um, but what kind of things, well, I'll say what kind of one thing would you like to change if you could?
I mean, I'm not going to speak to the bigger picture. I'm going to answer this question directly to my industry, because I have an answer, which is, I think, what my industry needs, meaning the theatrical industry, needs to accept digital, needs to stop being afraid of it, not needs to stop thinking that there's something wrong with it for live theater, and we need to find a way to connect with the next generation of theater goers, which we have not done. And we need to do that through digital. And what would be the solution for that, which I've thought about a lot, is that the theatrical unions and the Broadway League needs to create one theatrical website, one central website, and we need to film every show. And we need to
Hmm.
film every show for just the cost of the filming, no union cost to anyone. And then we have a universal website where we have Broadway, off Broadway, regional, community, digital, other, and everything is affordable. Maybe it's $5 to see a show for wherever you are. And keep in mind, this is all brand new income that has never existed before in theater. And what you do is you give half of it to the people that have put the money in to create the show, and then you give the other half to the authors and the actors and the musicians and the people that have created the show, so that theater artists can make lifetime royalties from their work and actually make a living doing theater. And this is so simple. This is not a complicated idea. It is incredibly obvious to me. And yet my industry resists digital so much. Like during the pandemic, they sort of had to be open to it. But even during the pandemic, they were telling these regional theaters, yes, you can film your show, but you can only sell the amount of tickets with the number of people that in your theater, and only for this length of time. These little theaters that are struggling, they're giving them these restrictions where they can't sell any more digital tickets than how many people could be in their seats, when literally they could change the entire structure of regional theater. So that's a way that I feel it could be a radical change for the better for our entire industry. But hey, I'm just one voice, and I don't have the power or the reach to make this happen. And our business is so entrenched in the old ways that I don't know that it could ever happen.
Is there a piece of work you've done that you think best exhibits your voice, who you are?
I always feel like what I've written most recently, exhibits my voice. So I just wrote a show that was off Broadway this summer called The Gospel According to Heather. That I feel like, I got to be a little political. I got to talk about religion in a particular way. I got to express some ideas that I feel about life that I don't normally do in some of my Jane Austen adaptations or Charlotte Bronte adaptations, or even sort of my more esoteric, two people. What am I saying? Some of my more original musicals that I haven't really had a showing yet in the world.
What, just for people who don't know, can you give what's a statement or something that you share in the Gospel According to Heather that you really wanted people to understand or to get from it?
That's a good question. There's this amazing James Baldwin quote that I hope I'm not butchering, that he says, the goal of art is to lay bare the questions that have been hidden by the answers. And that quote really resonates with me. Of course, he was talking about civil rights when he made that statement. And The Gospel According to Heather is not about civil rights, but it is about something deep that I think I think the idea that we have to ask these questions. We have to always ask questions about truths that are being laid before us, and we have to figure out our own answers. And in this show, I got to really, through the voice of Heather, ask some of those questions and explore some of those issues that I haven't explored in past shows.
Could you give one example?
Well, there's a trope in right-wing media that I've always found so menacing and so shameful, which is they will tell you what they want you to hear, and they will finish their sentence with, hey, I'm just asking questions, which is a way to lie without making it a lie. And I feel like I spent a little time in this musical trying to expose that aspect of how right-wing media is able to give us so much false information, and how they try to insulate themselves from the lies that they're telling. That's just one small aspect of the show.
What, if you were to write a book about your life, what do you think you'd call it? Like your autobiography?
Um, well, Danielle, I think as a creative person, I'd have to spend a little bit of time thinking of that title before I could give you my first draft. Um, so I don't know the answer to that. I wish I had a snappy answer, but I don't.
Would you want to write about all of it, or would you like to write just about a certain period in your life?
I used to sort of keep a journal that sort of took a form of a novel or my autobiography.
Hmm.
And, then I found when I went back and read it, I was a little bored. You know, I have friends that I've grown up with that have had, I have a friend that was a child star, and I'm actually reading his published, autobiography that I'm in. And it's like, wow, his life is amazing. Um, so I feel like my own life has been very rich and very full. I don't know that I would ever write about it or anyone would ever need to, but again, I guess I feel lucky and blessed that I've had a relatively good life. I've had tragedies. I've lost people. That's been the hardest aspect of my life by far. Nothing harder than that.
Hmm.
But for life, and we all have ups and downs. I feel like I've had it easy.
What,
So,
when you say that it's really hard to lose people, what makes it hard? Just the absence that the person is no longer there, or seeing them in pain and then pass away, or?
for me, it has been losing people too young, people that
Mm.
it was not their time. I've lost my parents, and of course that was hard, but
Oh yeah.
it was their time, let's say. And with losing, I lost my brother. It was not his time. And I lost a really incredible, really close friend. It was not her time. And I think those things have been the hardest for me to deal with.
Is it hard too because there's not really an answer?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, those basic life questions, why? Why
Yeah.
do tragedies happen? What do we learn from them? What is the sense of it? What does it mean?
That must be kind of, I would think, therapeutic for you in doing art as well, because you can express those things through characters. You're kind of the author of it. So I guess in some ways you can answer their questions that they're asking, but that you yourself ask and don't really have that conclusion, but then you have your characters that you can give a conclusion to or not. Um,
Yes, that's
yeah.
true. Um, yeah, I don't know that I've processed these losses through my work or through my music. I think they're a part of me,
Yeah.
and I think there's an aspect of them that comes forth. But I haven't written about it. I haven't processed it in that specific way. I don't think.
Do you have an individual that you see in the world now, or it could be in the past, that you look up to, that you would like to be more like?
Yeah, my therapist. I love my therapist. She's amazing. Um, I have so much respect for her. I feel so great whenever I talk to her. And she's somebody that I really feel has, she struggles in her life as we all do. But I learn so much from her, from how she calms me. There's some people that you just go into a room with and you just feel better.
Mm.
So I feel she is one person that I really admire. And I have a friend who's a public figure that I also truly admire. And she also has been a great calming effect on my life, and somebody that I've been able to go to for advice,
Mm.
and who has been able to guide me in a way that I've really been appreciative of. So yeah, and there are other people that I just admire and love.
What is, just two last questions for you. What is one way you would like to grow as an individual. So before you pass away, whenever that time is, what is something you would like to achieve or something personally you would like to be better at?
I'd like to continue to let go of my ego. I'd
Mm.
like to let go of the aspect of wondering what other people think of me. I've always, known that that is not a way to base one's life. There was a book years ago that I never read because I only read the title and I didn't have to read the book. And the title of the book was "What You Think of Me Is None of My Business." And of course, when you're an artist and you're getting reviewed in the world press, that's challenging. But that's the aspect of myself that I want to continue to work on. And generally, I'm comfortable in my own skin. But then suddenly, when you do a show in New York or Chicago or somewhere, and you're in the public eye, and people are talking about you, and they have their opinions about you, that can be very challenging. My favorite aspect of creating shows is, number one, the writing of them. That's my favorite part. And my second favorite part is being in the room with my collaborators and everybody and creating the show and getting on its feet and putting it in front of an audience. And my least favorite part is hearing what everybody thinks of it.
And then the last question for you is, do you think there's a piece of music or a song that describes who you are?
Interesting. I mean, the song that just hit in my brain when you asked that question, and I might have a different answer if you asked me tomorrow, would be "The Secret of Happiness" from Daddy Long Legs.
Why that song?
Well, when John Caird suggested that we make a musical of this obscure novel that I'd never read, I was doing a lot of work on myself at the time. And really just examining myself and just trying to grow. And so I read this book that was essentially a children's book, but there was a part in the book where the character of Jerusha, the lead character, makes this incredible statement. And she starts to talk about the secret of happiness is just opening yourself up. And there was a line in the song that I'm forgetting right now. Man, I'm forgetting my own lyric. Okay, yes, I remember it now. The secret of happiness is living in the now. That was literally in the novel. It's in my lyric. And it was like a philosophy that I was living at the time. So when I read that, it was like, yeah, I want to write this musical. I want to write this song. And that's how I feel. And what I loved about Daddy Longlegs and that show was I loved Jerusha. I loved her character. I connected to her. I connected to her positive aspects and how she looked at life. So, that's the song that comes to mind.